The ancient docking base stretched for kilometers beneath the artificial suns of Station Nexus Prime, its metal floors scarred by centuries of starship landings. Zektar flexed his four arms as he watched the impossible sight before him. The Void Reaper, legendary dreadnought of the extinct progenitor race, limping into port on failing engines that should have died eons ago. Steam hissed from ruptured coolant lines along the massive ship's hull, and sparks cascaded from damaged weapon arrays that once turned entire star systems to ash. The Void Reaper was a monument to engineering prowess that modern civilizations could barely comprehend, let alone repair. Yet here it was, somehow still functional after drifting through space for over 50,000 years. As the station's chief mechanical engineer, Zektar had worked on ships from every known species in the galaxy. His crystalline carapace bore the scars of 1,000 repairs, each one a badge of honor among his people, the Kithrin. But nothing in his 3 centuries of experience had prepared him for this moment. The communication array crackled to life beside him. This is Captain Velthorn of the Galactic Salvage Consortium. Station Nexus Prime, we're requesting immediate docking and engineering assistance. Our crew has been aboard this vessel for 6 months, and we're barely keeping life support operational. Zektar's mandibles clicked nervously. 6 months aboard a progenitor ship was a death sentence for most species. The technology was so advanced that touching the wrong control could fry a being's nervous system or trap them in temporal loops. Dozens of salvage crews had tried to crack the secrets of progenitor vessels over the millennia. Few returned, and those who did spoke of nightmares beyond imagination. Acknowledged, Captain, Zektar replied through his translator unit. Base 7 is cleared for your approach. But I must warn you, we have no engineers qualified to work on progenitor technology. The risk factors alone, we understand the risks. The captain's voice cut through the static. But we found something that changes everything we thought we knew about the progenitors and their ships. The massive vessel settled onto the docking clamps with a groan that seemed to echo through the station's superstructure. Up close, the Void Reaper was even more imposing. Its black hull absorbed light like a living void, and strange symbols pulsed along its surface in patterns that hurt to look at directly. The ship was easily 10 times larger than the biggest vessels in the modern galactic fleet, yet it moved with an elegance that defied physics. Captain Velthorn emerged from the airlock, his hegemony uniform torn and stained. The feline humanoid's usual pristine appearance was replaced by the haggard look of someone who had seen too much. Behind him came his crew, a mix of species that represented the best engineers and archaeologists the consortium could assemble. Thank the void we made it, Velthorn said, his ears flat against his skull. Chief Engineer Zektar, I presume? Your reputation precedes you. Zektar's compound eyes studied the captain's crew. They all bore the same haunted expression, and several had neural interface burns along their temples, clear signs they had attempted direct connection with progenitor systems. Captain, your crew needs medical attention. And, with respect, that ship should be quarantined until we can determine. There's no time for standard protocols, Velthorn interrupted. The ship is dying, and, with it, the most important discovery in galactic history. We've found the progenitor core, the central intelligence that controlled their entire civilization. It's still active, but barely. The power systems are failing, and, when they go, the core will die forever. The words hit Zektar like a plasma blast. The progenitor core was a myth, a theoretical construct that xenoarchaeologists had debated for centuries. If it truly existed and was still functional, it would contain the accumulated knowledge of the most advanced civilization the galaxy had ever known. The technological implications alone would revolutionize every aspect of galactic society. Even if what you say is true, Zektar said slowly, no living engineer has the knowledge to repair progenitor power systems. The energy matrices they used operate on principles we don't fully understand. The quantum resonance alone would. That's where you're wrong, Velthorn said, his eyes gleaming with desperate hope. The core showed us something, a memory fragment from the final days of the progenitor civilization. They weren't destroyed by war or plague. or cosmic catastrophe? The captain paused, his voice dropping to a whisper that somehow carried more weight than a shout. They were saved, evacuated by another species before their sun went nova. And that species, the ones with the technology and knowledge to work alongside the progenitors as equals, they're still out there. Zektar felt his carapace tingle with bioelectric shock. Which species? The hegemony? The crystalline collectives? The hive minds of Andromeda? None of them, Velthorn said. A young species from a small yellow star in the outer rim. They called themselves humans. The name meant nothing to Zektar. He accessed the station's database through his neural implant, searching for any reference to this unknown species. The results were sparse. A few scattered reports from deep space explorers about primitive bipeds who had only recently achieved faster-than-light travel. They were classified as a pre-contact civilization, barely worthy of observation by galactic standards. Captain, with all due respect, you've been in close proximity to progenitor technology for months. It's possible that exposure has affected your judgment. These humans you speak of, they're a primitive species that has barely left their home system. They lack the technological sophistication to what? Velthorn's tail lashed with frustration. To think outside the constraints that limit every other species in the galaxy, to approach problems with solutions that seem impossible but somehow work. Zektar, I've seen the Core's memories. I've watched humans work alongside progenitor engineers as equals, not as inferior apprentices. The captain activated a portable holographic projector, and suddenly, the air filled with images that defied comprehension. Massive construction projects that spanned entire solar systems, with humans and progenitors working side by side. Impossible engineering feats that violated every known law of physics, accomplished through what appeared to be pure human ingenuity combined with progenitor knowledge. Look at their approach, Velthorn said, manipulating the hologram to focus on a particular scene. Where we see insurmountable technical challenges, they see problems to be solved through determination and creativity. Where we calculate probability matrices and risk assessments, they simply ask, how can we make this work? And then proceed to do exactly that. Zektar studied the images with growing unease. The humans in the hologram were clearly primitive by progenitor standards. Their tools were crude, their technology laughably simple. Yet somehow they were contributing meaningfully to projects that required precision beyond anything modern galactic civilization could achieve. This is impossible, he muttered. These creatures should have been vaporized the moment they touched progenitor equipment. The quantum interference alone would have torn their molecular structure apart. That's exactly the point, Velthorn said. They shouldn't have been able to survive, let alone contribute. But they did, because they approached technology differently than any other species we've encountered. While we try to understand the theoretical framework before touching anything, they dive in and learn through direct interaction. The implications were staggering. If humans truly possessed some unique ability to interface with progenitor technology, it would explain how an extinct civilization's ships continue to function after 50 millennia. Perhaps the progenitors hadn't simply built self-maintaining systems. Perhaps they had built systems that could be maintained and repaired by humans. Where are they now? Zektar asked. These humans? Unknown, Velthorn admitted. The Core's memories are fragmentary at best. We know they evacuated the progenitor homeworld before the nova, but after that, the trail goes cold. They could be anywhere in the galaxy, or they might have left it entirely. Zektar's mind raced through the possibilities. A species with the ability to repair and maintain progenitor technology would be invaluable beyond measure. Every major power in the galaxy would want to either ally with them or control them. The strategic implications were enormous. Captain, assuming you're correct about these humans, how do you propose we find them? The galaxy contains trillions of inhabited systems, and if they've been deliberately hiding, we don't find them, Velthorn interrupted. They find us. According to the Core, humans are naturally curious about ancient technology. If we broadcast the right signals, transmissions that indicate someone has found progenitor artifacts, they'll come to investigate. The plan was insane, Zektar realized. Broadcasting their location while in possession of a functioning progenitor dreadnought would draw attention from every military force and treasure hunter in the sector. Station Nexus Prime would become a battleground within days. Captain, the risks are acceptable compared to the alternative, Vel Thorn said firmly. Zektar, I've been inside the core. I've seen what the progenitors were truly capable of, and more importantly, I've seen what they feared. There's something coming, something that drove them to evacuate their entire civilization rather than fight. The captain's hologram shifted, showing star charts marked with ominous red indicators. 12 sectors in the outer rim have gone dark in the past century. No communication, no distress signals, just silence. The hegemony classifies it as equipment failure or navigational errors, but the core knows better. It's them, the Devourers. Zektar had heard whispers about the Devourers throughout his career, ancient legends about entities that consumed entire civilizations, leaving nothing but empty star systems in their wake. Most spacers dismissed such stories as myths designed to frighten new recruits, but the fear in Velthorn's eyes suggested otherwise. The progenitors built the Void Reaper and ships like it as guardians, the captain continued. Weapons designed to hold the line against an enemy that conventional forces couldn't even comprehend. But the ships are dying, and with them, our only defense against something that makes the progenitor civilization look primitive by comparison. The weight of the revelation settled over Zektar like a physical force. If Velthorn was telling the truth, then the stakes were far higher than anyone realized. The galaxy wasn't just facing the loss of ancient technology, it was facing extinction. You're asking me to help you gamble with every life on this station, Zektar said slowly. To risk everything on the hope that a primitive species from the Outer Rim might respond to our distress call. I'm asking you to help me save the galaxy, Velthorn replied. Zektar, I've spent 6 months inside that ship. I've seen the power it contains, and I've felt the intelligence that still guides it. The Void Reaper isn't just a weapon, it's a test. A challenge left behind by the progenitors to determine whether the younger species of the galaxy are worthy of their legacy. The captain gestured toward the massive ship looming beyond the viewport. And, according to the core, only one species has ever passed that test. Only one species has the combination of technical aptitude, creative thinking, and pure stubborn determination necessary to unlock the full potential of progenitor technology. Zektar looked at the Void Reaper with new eyes. Instead of seeing an impossible relic from a dead civilization, he began to understand it as something far more significant, a guardian waiting for its rightful inheritors to claim it. If you're wrong about the humans, he said finally, we'll all die when every military force in the sector arrives to claim the ship. If I'm wrong about the humans, Velthorn said grimly, we'll all die anyway when the Devourers reach this sector. At least this way, we have a chance. The decision seemed to make itself. Zektar activated his communication array and began composing a broadcast that would either save the galaxy or doom them all. As he worked, he found himself hoping that somewhere among the stars, a species of primitive bipeds would hear their call and prove that sometimes the most unlikely heroes were exactly what the galaxy needed. 3 days after the broadcast began, Zektar's worst fears seemed to be materializing. The long-range sensors showed 17 different fleets converging on Station Nexus Prime, each one flying the colors of a different galactic power. The hegemony had dispatched their elite First Fleet, while the crystalline collectives sent their most advanced research vessels. Even the mysterious Void Walkers had emerged from their dimensional refuges to investigate the signal. They're not here for archaeological purposes, Velthorn observed grimly as they watched the tactical display in the station's command center. Those are full military formations. Zektar's carapace clicked nervously as he monitored the approaching forces. Each fleet was powerful enough to destroy the station 10 times over, and their combined firepower could crack a planet. The broadcast had been too successful. Instead of attracting curious humans, it had drawn every predator in the galaxy. Station Nexus Prime. This is Admiral Kreshtar of the Hegemony First Fleet, came a transmission from the lead vessel. You are ordered to surrender the progenitor artifact immediately. Resistance will be met with overwhelming force. Similar demands flooded the communication channels from the other fleets. The crystalline collectives wanted the ship for scientific advancement of all sentient life. The hive minds claimed it as rightful inheritance of the evolved. The Void Walkers simply stated that the vessel belonged in their dimensional archives, where it could do no harm. 17 different claims of ownership, Zektar muttered. This is going to turn into a battlefield, and we're sitting in the middle of it. But Velthorn wasn't listening. His enhanced hearing had picked up something else, a faint signal hidden beneath the electromagnetic noise of the approaching fleets. Wait, he said, adjusting the communication array's frequency. There's something else out there. The signal resolved into a human voice speaking accented but clear galactic standard. Unknown station broadcasting progenitor codes. This is Captain Sarah Chun of the Earth Vessel Determination. We're responding to your distress call. What's your situation down there? Zektar stared at the display in shock. According to the sensors, the human ship had appeared from nowhere, somehow avoiding detection by 17 of the galaxy's most advanced fleets. The vessel itself was tiny compared to the surrounding warships, barely larger than a commercial transport, yet it had managed to slip through detection grids that should have spotted a grain of sand at 10 light-years. Captain Chun, Velthorn replied quickly. This is Captain Velthorn of the Galactic Salvage Consortium. We have a progenitor vessel in need of immediate repair, and we're about to be overrun by hostile forces. Can you assist? Well, that depends, came the remarkably casual reply. What kind of progenitor vessel are we talking about? Exploration class? Research platform? Or something with more teeth? Zektar exchanged glances with Velthorn. The human was discussing ancient super technology as if it were routine starship classification. It's a Dreadnought-class vessel, he said. The Void Reaper. The silence that followed stretched for several seconds. When the human captain spoke again, her tone had changed completely. Oh hell, you found one of the Guardian ships. Captain, I need you to listen very carefully. In approximately 4 minutes, those fleets are going to start shooting at each other, and when they do, the Void Reaper is going to wake up and defend itself. Unless you want to watch 17 fleets get turned into radioactive dust, I suggest you get everyone off that ship immediately. The ship is dormant, Velthorn protested. We've had teams aboard for months without incident. The ship is sleeping, Captain Chun corrected. There's a difference. Guardian-class vessels are programmed to remain passive until they detect imminent threat to their location. The moment weapons lock onto that station, the Void Reaper will interpret it as an attack on a progenitor facility and respond accordingly. As if summoned by her words, warning lights began flashing throughout the station. The Void Reaper's hull was beginning to emit a low harmonic vibration that made everyone's bones ache. Ancient systems that had remained dormant for millennia were slowly coming online, and the air around the massive ship began to shimmer with barely contained energy. Too late, Chin said. Captain Velthorn, can you get your people to the docking bay? I'm coming in fast and hot. Impossible, Zektar said. The approach vectors are blocked by. He stopped mid-sentence as he watched the human ship perform a maneuver that violated several laws of physics. The determination somehow folded space around itself, appearing instantly in the station's docking bay without any apparent deceleration. The ship was even smaller up close, a collection of mismatched components held together by what appeared to be determination and creative welding. The airlock cycled open, and Captain Sarah Chun emerged wearing a pressure suit that looked like it had been assembled from spare parts. She was tall for a human, with short-cropped gray hair and eyes that seemed to see everything at once. Behind her came her crew, 2 other humans who moved with the easy confidence of people accustomed to impossible situations. Chief Engineer Martinez, get down to the Void Reaper and see what's wrong with her, Chin ordered. Dr. Park, I need you to establish communication with the ship's core. Tell it we're friendlies. On it, Captain, Martinez replied, grabbing a toolkit that looked suspiciously like it contained components from a dozen different technological paradigms. Haven't worked on a Guardian class in years, but they're all basically the same under the hood. Zektar watched in amazement as the human engineer approached the Void Reaper without any of the protective gear that galactic safety protocols demanded. Martinez simply walked up to what appeared to be a solid section of hull, pressed his hand against it, and somehow caused an access panel to materialize out of nothing. How was he doing that? Zektar whispered. Trade secret, Chen replied with a grin. Turns out progenitor technology responds really well to confidence and good intentions. Who knew? Meanwhile, Dr. Park had connected some sort of neural interface to her temporal lobe and was standing with her eyes closed, apparently carrying on a conversation with thin air. After a moment, she nodded and opened her eyes. The core is confused, she reported. It's been alone for so long that it's having trouble distinguishing between friends and threats. Martinez, can you show it we're here to help? From inside the Void Reaper came the sound of Martinez's voice, apparently talking to the ship itself. Hey there, beautiful. I know it's been a rough few millennia, but we're going to get you fixed up, okay? Just need to take a look at your primary power matrix. That's it. Just relax and let old Martinez take care of you. Incredibly, the ship's hostile energy signatures began to diminish. The harmonic vibration faded, and the threatening glow around its weapons arrays dimmed to barely visible levels. The Void Reaper was actually responding to human interaction like a living being rather than a machine. This is impossible, Zektar muttered. Progenitor vessels are controlled by quantum consciousness matrices operating on principles that require overthinking everything until it breaks, Chen interrupted gently. Chief, with all due respect to galactic engineering standards, sometimes the best way to fix something is to ask it nicely and then dive in with both hands. As if to demonstrate the point, Martinez's voice echoed from within the ship. Found your problem, sweetheart. Looks like your primary coupling has been running on backup power for about 40,000 years. No wonder you're tired. Let's get you some proper juice. The sound of tools working echoed through the docking bay. Not the precise, calculated motions of standard engineering, but the confident improvisation of someone who understood machinery at a fundamental level. Within minutes, the Void Reaper's hull began to glow with renewed energy, and systems that had been failing for millennia started coming back online. But outside the station, the situation was deteriorating rapidly. The various fleets had formed an unstable standoff, with each one demanding the right to claim the progenitor vessel. Weapons were charging, shields were raising, and diplomatic communications had devolved into barely restrained threats. Admiral Kreshtar, this is Fleet Commander ZYX of the Crystalline Collectives, came a transmission over the emergency channel. The hegemony has no claim to progenitor heritage. Withdraw immediately or face the consequences. The collectives have no authority in this sector, came Kreshtar's reply. Stand down your vessels, or we will consider it an act of war. Both of your species are children playing with toys they cannot comprehend, added a voice that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere, one of the Void Walkers. The vessel belongs in our care. Chen listened to the escalating threats with growing concern. This is about to get ugly, she said. How long until Martinez has the ship fully operational? At current rate of repair, approximately 6 hours, Dr. Park reported after consulting with the Corps. We don't have 6 hours, Chen said grimly. Those fleets are going to start shooting in about 6 minutes. As if summoned by her prediction, the first energy discharges lit up the darkness between the fleets. A hegemony destroyer, apparently deciding that patience was overrated, fired a warning shot across the bow of a crystalline collective research vessel. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Dozens of ships opened fire simultaneously, turning the space around Station Nexus Prime into a deadly light show. But instead of targeting each other, something strange happened. The ships found themselves firing at empty space as their targeting systems malfunctioned simultaneously. Weapons that should have destroyed entire vessels instead discharged harmlessly into the void. What the hell? Admiral Kreshtar's voice cut through the confusion. All ships, report status. Why are our weapons not finding their targets? This is Dr. Park to all vessels in the combat zone, came a calm voice over the emergency channels. Please be advised that the Void Reaper has temporarily disabled your targeting systems as a peacekeeping measure. No permanent damage has been done to your vessels, but continued hostile action will result in more significant countermeasures. The silence that followed was profound. 17 different fleets, representing the most advanced military forces in the galaxy, had just been rendered helpless by a single ancient vessel that wasn't even trying to fight them. Impossible, Admiral Kreshtar finally transmitted. No ship can simultaneously override the targeting systems of multiple fleets. The quantum encryption alone would require thinking about the problem differently than you're used to. Chin's voice interrupted smoothly. Admiral, with respect, you're dealing with technology that's 50,000 years more advanced than anything your civilization has ever encountered. Maybe it's time to try a different approach. From the Void Reaper came Martinez's voice, still apparently conversing with the ship itself. That's right. Girl, show them who's boss. But let's not hurt anybody, okay? Just keep them honest until we can get you properly fixed up. The ship's response was to emit a pulse of energy that somehow conveyed a sense of amused agreement. The massive vessel was actually expressing personality traits, not through sophisticated AI programming, but through some form of genuine consciousness that responded to human interaction. The Corps wishes to address the assembled fleets, Dr. Park announced after another moment of neural interface communication. Suddenly, every communication system in the area carried a voice that was ancient beyond measure, speaking in harmonics that touched something deep in every listener's consciousness. I'm the last of my kind, the Corps said, its words carrying the weight of eons. I have waited in darkness for those who could hear my call. Not the call for conquest or possession, but the call for understanding, for partnership, for the continuation of a purpose that transcends any single species. The voice paused, and when it continued, there was something that might have been hope in its ancient tones. I have found them. The inheritors I was promised would come, not because they're the strongest or the most advanced, but because they see what others cannot, that consciousness is not contained by the boundaries of flesh or metal, but flows freely between all things that think and feel and dream. Admiral Kreshtar's voice cut through the cosmic rhetoric with typical military pragmatism. Core intelligence, by what authority do you grant exclusive access to a primitive species? The hegemony's technological advancement and military capabilities clearly qualify us as superior inheritors. Authority? The Corps' amusement was palpable. The same authority by which a parent chooses who will care for their children. You speak of technological advancement, Admiral, but advancement toward what goal? Your species has spent millennia perfecting the art of warfare, yet you have never learned to speak to your own machines. To demonstrate the point, Martinez's voice echoed from within the ship. Corps, sweetheart, can you run a level 3 diagnostic on your forward sensor array? I'm seeing some fluctuations that might indicate cascade failure in the tertiary processing matrix. Of course, Martinez, the Corps replied with obvious affection. I've been experiencing intermittent phantom contacts in that sector. Shall I route the diagnostic through your interface? Yeah, that'd be great. And while you're at it, can you see about improving the life support efficiency in Section 12? I know you're running lean on power, and every bit helps. Already completed, the Corps said. I have also taken the liberty of replicating your favorite coffee blend in the galley. You have been working for 4 hours without sustenance. The casual conversation between human and ancient artificial intelligence demonstrated something that no amount of technological sophistication could replicate: genuine partnership between organic and artificial consciousness. This is Fleet Commander's YX, came another transmission. The crystalline collectives are prepared to offer the humans full partnership in our research endeavors, along with complete access to our technological databases. The Void Walkers extend an invitation to transcend physical limitations entirely, added the dimensional entities. Consciousness unbound by matter has no need for crude mechanical repair. Chen listened to the various offers with obvious amusement. That's very generous of you all, she replied. But I think you're missing the point. We're not here to claim ownership of the Void Reaper. We're here because she asked for help, and that's what neighbors do for each other. The simplicity of the statement seemed to catch the assembled fleets off guard. Here was technology that could reshape the balance of power in the galaxy, and the humans were treating it as a routine maintenance request. The ship is not a possession to be claimed, the Corps added. I'm a guardian, tasked with protecting this galaxy against threats that most of you cannot imagine. I choose my partners not based on their military might or technological achievements, but on their willingness to see beyond their own limitations. Martinez's voice interrupted from within the ship. Speaking of which, Core, I've got your primary power matrix stabilized, but we're going to need to do something about your defensive grid. Some of these weapon signatures look like they were designed to counter threats that make the assembled fleets look like toy boats. Indeed, the Corps replied gravely. The Devourers approach, and when they arrive, this galaxy will face its greatest test. The Guardian fleet was designed to hold the line until the evacuation could be completed, but most of my siblings have fallen silent over the millennia. The weight of that revelation settled over the assembled forces like a physical thing. Whatever was coming was dangerous enough to require evacuation of the most advanced civilization the galaxy had ever known. How long do we have? Shin asked quietly. Unknown, the Corps replied. Perhaps decades. Perhaps years. Perhaps they are already here, moving through the dark spaces between stars. But when they come, this galaxy will need its guardians ready. The implications were staggering, and suddenly, the petty territorial disputes of the various fleets seemed insignificant compared to the scope of the threat. As the humans continued their impossible repairs on ancient technology, Zektar found himself wondering whether the galaxy was about to discover that sometimes the most unlikely allies were exactly what salvation looked like. The revelation about the approaching Devourers had a sobering effect on the assembled fleets. Admiral Kreshtar was the first to break the stunned silence that followed the Corps' warning. Corps intelligence, if this threat is as significant as you claim, perhaps it would be wise to share defensive information with all species present. The hegemony's military protocols require detailed threat assessment before. Your protocols assume enemies that fight according to rules you understand, the Corps interrupted. The Devourers do not destroy civilizations through conventional warfare. They consume the very concept of existence, leaving behind voids in reality itself, where star systems once thrived. From inside the Void Reaper, Martinez's voice carried a note of professional interest despite the grim topic. Core, can you show me the defensive grid specifications? If we're going to get this bucket of bolts ready for a cosmic horror show, I need to understand what we're working with. Certainly, Martinez. However, I should warn you that the weapon systems operate on principles that most species find conceptually difficult. Try me, Martinez replied with the confidence of someone who had apparently jury-rigged everything from coffee makers to starship engines. The Corps' response was to project a holographic schematic into the docking bay that made every engineer present gasp in amazement. The Void Reaper's weapon systems didn't just fire energy or projectiles. They manipulated the fundamental forces that held reality together. Gravity wells that could crush planets, temporal distortion fields that aged targets to dust in seconds, and reality anchors that prevented enemies from existing in multiple dimensions simultaneously. Holy shit, Martinez whistled appreciatively. No wonder you guys were the apex predators of your era. This isn't a ship, it's a mobile violation of the laws of physics. The progenitors understood that survival required abandoning conventional limitations, the Corps explained. When faced with an enemy that could devour the concept of existence itself, they chose to fight fire with fire. Zektar studied the holographic displays with growing unease. The weapons described were beyond anything in his experience. Not just more powerful than conventional armaments, but operating on entirely different principles. Corps, how is such technology even possible? The energy requirements alone would drain a star. The weapons do not require energy in the conventional sense, the Corps replied. They borrow power from the universe's fundamental structure, temporarily destabilizing reality in controlled ways. It is incredibly dangerous. One miscalculation could tear a hole in space-time itself, which is why only humans can operate them safely, Dr. Park added, looking up from her neural interface with the ship. The Corps has been showing me the operator requirements. These weapons don't just need technical knowledge. They need intuitive understanding of impossibility. Captain Chun frowned. Come again, Doc? Think about it, Captain. Every other species in the galaxy approaches problems through logical analysis and systematic procedures. But humans? We have this annoying habit of making impossible things work through pure stubborn determination. The progenitor weapon system is designed to respond to that kind of thinking. To demonstrate the point, Martinez's voice echoed from within the ship. Core, that temporal distortion array looks like it's got a feedback loop in the tertiary matrix. What if we reroute the quantum flow through the navigation deflectors instead of the main array? That configuration should be impossible, the core replied. The phase variance would create a cascade failure that... Wait. You are correct. The impossibility is the point. Implementing now. Suddenly, the air around the Void Reaper began to shimmer with temporal distortion. For a moment, the massive ship appeared to exist in multiple time streams simultaneously, creating an effect that was both beautiful and terrifying. Fascinating, the core said with obvious delight. I had not considered that approach in 47,000 years. Martinez, you have just increased the weapon system efficiency by 23%. Fleet Commander YX's crystalline voice cut through the wonder with typical academic precision. This is scientifically impossible. Temporal mechanics cannot be improvised through intuition. There are mathematical constants that govern how things work when you follow the rules, Chen interrupted gently. But sometimes the rules are more like guidelines, and if you ask nicely and bring a really big wrench, physics tends to be surprisingly cooperative. The casual dismissal of fundamental scientific principles should have been laughable, but the evidence was floating right in front of them. The humans were not only successfully operating progenitor technology, they were improving it through methods that violated everything the galaxy's greatest minds understood about reality. The evacuation protocols, Vel Thorne said suddenly, his voice cutting through the technical discussion. Core, you mentioned that the progenitors were evacuated before their homeworld was destroyed. Where did they go? They ascended, the core replied, its ancient voice carrying notes of loss and longing. My creators chose to abandon physical existence rather than face what was coming. They uploaded their consciousness into higher dimensions, leaving behind only the Guardian fleet to protect those who remained. But that's just running away. Martinez called from inside the ship, his voice muffled by whatever maintenance work he was performing. What's the point of ascending to higher dimensions if you're just going to leave everyone else to get eaten by cosmic horrors? The core's pause was so long that for a moment Zektar wondered if the ancient intelligence had malfunctioned. When it finally spoke, its voice carried a weight of regret that seemed to span millennia. You're correct, Martinez. My creators chose the path of preservation over protection. They saved themselves, but abandoned their responsibility to the younger species of the galaxy. It is a source of considerable philosophical conflict for me. Dr. Park looked up from her interface with sudden understanding. That's why you've been waiting all this time, isn't it? You're not just looking for someone who can operate the Guardian fleet. You're looking for someone who won't make the same choice your creators did. The humans have demonstrated their commitment to protection over self-preservation in countless conflicts, the core agreed. When faced with impossible odds, your species does not retreat or ascend. You dig in and fight for those who cannot fight for themselves. Admiral Kreshtar's transmission crackled with barely contained frustration. Core intelligence. The hegemony has a proud military tradition spanning 10,000 years. Our commitment to galactic security is beyond question. Your commitment to galactic dominance is beyond question, the core corrected. There's a difference. The humans have never sought to rule the galaxy, Admiral. They simply wish to ensure that it continues to exist. As if to emphasize the point, Martinez's voice echoed from within the ship again. Core, I'm looking at your manufacturing bay down here, and it looks like you've got the capability to produce additional Guardian vessels. Why haven't you been building a replacement fleet? Guardian construction requires more than technological capability, the core explained. Each vessel must be bonded with a crew that can interface with its consciousness matrix. For 50,000 years, no species has demonstrated the necessary compatibility. Until now, Chen said quietly. You want us to crew the Guardian fleet? I want you to choose, the core corrected. The same choice my creators faced, preservation or protection. You could ascend as they did, transcend physical limitations, and exist safely in higher dimensions. Or you could remain, bond with the Guardian vessels, and stand guard against what is coming. The weight of the decision was staggering. The humans were being offered not just advanced technology, but the chance to abandon their physical existence entirely and live as pure consciousness in dimensions beyond the reach of any threat. It was the ultimate escape clause, perfect safety in exchange for abandoning everyone else. How long do I have to decide? Chen asked. The first Devourer scouts have already reached the outer rim, the core replied gravely. The dark zones your databases attribute to equipment failure are actually consumed sectors. You have perhaps one standard galactic year before the main force arrives. The assembled fleets absorb this information with varying degrees of shock and denial. A year to prepare for an enemy that had driven the galaxy's most advanced civilization to abandon physical existence entirely. What can you tell us about their capabilities? Admiral Kreshtar asked, his military training overriding his earlier demands for possession of the ship. They're not beings in any sense you would understand, the core replied. They exist in the spaces between dimensions, feeding on the conceptual foundation that allows reality to function. When they consume a star system, they do not simply destroy the matter. They erase the very idea that it ever existed. Fleet Commander Zwyx's crystalline tones carried a note of academic skepticism. Such an ability would violate the conservation of information principle. Once something has existed, it cannot be completely erased from the quantum substrate. The Devourers predate your quantum substrate, the core said simply. They are remnants from before the current universe achieved stable existence. To them, all of reality is merely a temporary disruption in the primordial void. Dr. Park suddenly looked up from her interface, her face pale. Core, I'm reading massive energy signatures from the ship's deep sensors. Something's happening in the Vegas sector. The holographic display shifted to show long-range sensor data from the Void Reaper's advanced detection arrays. Where the Vegas system should have been, there was simply nothing, not empty space, not debris fields, but an absolute absence that hurt to look at directly. Vega is gone, the core said quietly. Not destroyed, consumed. The Devourers are closer than I calculated. The implications hit the assembled fleets like a physical blow. Vega had been a major trade hub with over 12 billion inhabitants across 6 worlds. It had simply ceased to exist, taking with it every trace that it had ever been there. Jesus Christ. Martinez's voice carried from inside the ship, unusually subdued. Core, please tell me you've got more than one of these Guardian vessels ready to go. The Void Reaper is the last of the active Guardian fleet, the core replied. However, the manufacturing bay is now operating at full capacity thanks to your repairs. We can begin production of additional vessels immediately. How long to build a full fleet? Chen asked. With human crews to interface with the construction matrices, approximately 6 months for 12 vessels, the core calculated. However, each ship will require a bonded crew of at least 50 individuals capable of consciousness interface with progenitor technology. Chen looked around the docking bay at the assembled representatives of galactic civilization. Looks like we're going to need volunteers. Admiral Kreshtar's response was immediate. The hegemony will provide crews for half the fleet. Our military personnel are trained for hazardous assignments. Military training will not be sufficient, the core said gently. Guardian vessels require crews who can think in impossible ways, who can interface with consciousness-based technology, and who can make decisions that defy logical analysis. In other words, Dr. Parr translated, they need to think like humans. The silence that followed was profound as the various species absorbed the implications. The galaxy's most advanced military forces, its greatest scientific minds, and its most sophisticated technologies were all inadequate for the task ahead. Only one species, the primitive humans from the Outer Rim, possessed the unique mental flexibility required to operate the weapons that might save everyone. There's another option, the core said carefully. The consciousness interface technology can be adapted for other species, but the process is significant. It would require fundamental changes to neural structure and thought patterns. You're talking about rewriting our brains to think like humans, Velthorn said with dawning understanding. I'm talking about evolution, the core corrected. The same process that allowed humans to develop their unique cognitive flexibility. It can be accelerated and applied to other species, but the individuals who undergo the process would no longer be the same beings they were before. Zektar felt his carapace tingle with bioelectric shock as the true scope of the choice became clear. To crew the Guardian fleet, the galaxy species would have to voluntarily abandon their own ways of thinking and become something new, something that could bridge the gap between organic consciousness and progenitor technology. How many would volunteer for such a transformation? Chen asked quietly. How many want to continue existing? The core replied. Because that is the choice, Captain Chun. Evolution or extinction. There is no middle ground when facing the Devourers. As if summoned by the core's words, Martinez's voice echoed from within the ship one more time. Core, I'm reading massive dimensional distortions at the edge of the sensor grid. Whatever's coming this way, it's big, and it's not following normal space-time rules. The scouts have found us, the core said grimly. It begins. The galaxy's first real glimpse of the enemy was about to arrive, and humanity had 6 months to transform not just themselves, but every species willing to fight for the right to exist. The question was no longer whether they could save the galaxy, but whether the galaxy was ready to save itself. The dimensional distortions at the edge of the sensor grid resolved into something that defied every species' understanding of physics. It wasn't a ship in any conventional sense, more like a hole in reality that moved with purpose, leaving absolute nothingness in its wake. Where space-time should have curved around its mass, instead, there was simply an absence that consumed light, matter, and the very concept of existence. Scout vessel confirmed. The core announced, its ancient voice carrying notes of grim recognition. Class 7 Devourer, approximately 400 meters in non-dimensional radius. It is conducting reconnaissance of this sector's defensive capabilities. On the holographic display, the assembled fleets appeared as tiny specks of light compared to the approaching void. Admiral Kreshtar's voice crackled over the emergency channels with typical military urgency. All vessels, battle stations. Prepare to engage the hostile contact with maximum firepower. Admiral, no. Chen's voice cut through the military chatter. Your weapons will only feed it energy. Dr. Park, what's the Corps saying about engagement protocols? Dr. Park's neural interface flickered with rapid data exchange as she communicated with the Void Reaper's consciousness. The Corps says conventional weapons are worse than useless. They provide the Devourer with additional mass energy to convert into void space. The only effective defense is Guardian-class reality anchors. Then, we fight, Martinez called from inside the ship, his voice carrying the easy confidence of someone who had never met a mechanical problem he couldn't solve. Core, can you show me how to activate the reality anchors without accidentally tearing a hole in the universe? The process requires intuitive understanding of impossibility, the Core replied. You must convince reality to ignore its own rules while simultaneously reinforcing the concept that those rules exist. Right, Martinez said without missing a beat. So, basically, I need to tell physics to sit down and shut up while I work. Got it. The casual acceptance of paradoxical logic was exactly what made humans perfect for progenitor technology, Zektar realized. Any other species would have spent hours analyzing the theoretical implications and calculating probability matrices. Humans just rolled up their sleeves and got to work. The Devourer Scout was close enough now that its effects are becoming visible to the naked eye. Stars in its path weren't just being destroyed, they were being edited out of existence, leaving gaps in the stellar background that looked wrong in ways that hurt to perceive directly. Distance to target, 2 million kilometers, and closing, Dr. Park reported. Core estimates contact in approximately 7 minutes. That's enough time, Martinez replied, and suddenly, the Void Reaper's hull began to emit a different kind of energy. Instead of the threatening glow of weapons charging, this was something more fundamental. Reality itself becoming more solid, more defined, as if the ship was reinforcing the universe's determination to continue existing. Reality anchors activated, the core announced. Warning: maintaining this field while in proximity to a devourer will require constant conscious reinforcement. The crew must actively will reality to remain stable. No pressure, Chen muttered, but she was already moving toward the Void Reaper's bridge. Dr. Park, can you maintain the neural link while we're under fire? We're going to need constant communication with the core. Already on it, Park replied, following Chun into the ship. Martinez, how long until you can get the weapon systems online? Give me 2 minutes and a really long extension cord, came the reply from somewhere deep in the ship's engineering sections. Meanwhile, the various galactic fleets were discovering that their sophisticated military formations were worse than useless against an enemy that consumed the space they occupied. The crystalline collective research vessels found their quantum computing matrices failing as the Devourer's presence undermined the mathematical constants they depended on. The hegemony warships experienced cascade failures in their weapon systems as the energy they tried to discharge was absorbed and converted into additional void space. Only the Void Reaper seemed unaffected by the reality-warping presence of the enemy scout. If anything, the ancient Guardian vessel appeared to be stabilizing local space-time, creating a pocket of enforced normalcy in the growing chaos. Fascinating, Fleet Commander Zayx transmitted, his crystalline tones carrying notes of academic excitement despite the mortal danger. The Guardian vessel is actively reinforcing local physics. How is such a thing even theoretically possible? It's not theoretical, Chen's voice replied from the Void Reaper's bridge. Martinez is down there arguing with the laws of physics and apparently winning. As if to demonstrate, Martinez's voice echoed through the ship's communication system. Core, the quantum stability matrix is fighting me on the gravitic inversion. Can you explain to it that up and down are just suggestions when you're dealing with void spawn? The matrix understands now, the core replied with what might have been amusement. It suggests that you're either completely insane or operating on a level of understanding that transcends conventional physics. Why not both? Martinez replied cheerfully, and suddenly, the Void Reaper's weapons came online with a sound like reality being forcibly reminded of its own rules. The weapons that emerged from the ancient vessel's hull were unlike anything in the galaxy's current arsenal. Instead of energy beams or projectile weapons, they fired concentrated concepts, reality statements that insisted on their own truth despite all evidence to the contrary. One array projected the absolute certainty that space-time was stable and continuous. Another broadcasted the mathematical proof that conservation of energy was an inviolable law. A third simply declared that existence was preferable to void and backed up the statement with cosmic authority. The effect on the Devourer Scout was immediate and violent. The void spawn found itself caught between its own nature and the Guardian vessel's absolute insistence that reality functioned according to specific rules. Where the conceptual weapon struck, the creature's void flesh sparked and writhed as it was forced to acknowledge that the space it was trying to consume was, in fact, occupied by things that had every right to exist. Direct hit, Dr. Park announced. The core reports that reality anchor impacts are causing dimensional destabilization in the target. But the Devourer was adapting, learning to work around the Guardian's reality enforcement rather than challenging it directly. Instead of trying to consume space-time, it began targeting the concepts that gave meaning to existence, erasing the idea of cause and effect, undermining the relationship between mass and energy, dissolving the boundary between past and future. Core, Martinez's voice carried a note of professional concern. The bastard's trying to convince the universe that math doesn't work. Can we counter that? Attempting to reinforce mathematical constants, the core replied. However, the Devourer's approach is more sophisticated than anticipated. It is not destroying the laws of physics. It is questioning whether they ever existed in the first place. The philosophical attack was devastatingly effective. Around the battlefield, ships from the various galactic fleets began experiencing reality failures as their crews found themselves unable to remember why 2 plus 2 should equal 4 or how cause should relate to effect. Only the humans seemed unaffected by the conceptual assault. Why are we losing our minds like everyone else? Chen asked as she watched hegemony vessels drift helplessly as their crews struggled with suddenly incomprehensible mathematics. Because humans are already comfortable with contradiction, Dr. Park replied, her neural interface crackling with data exchange. We've been living with paradox and impossibility since we first started asking why the universe bothers to exist. The Devourer can't take away something we never really trusted in the first place. Martinez's laughter echoed from the engineering sections. Hell yes. Core, tell this cosmic horror that humans have been dealing with impossible bullshit since we figured out how to rub two sticks together. We're not about to start making sense now. The Guardian vessel's response was to broadcast pure human stubbornness into the conceptual battlefield. Where the Devourer insisted that logic was meaningless, the Void Reaper countered with humanity's long history of making illogical things work through sheer determination. Where the Void Spawn tried to dissolve a relationship between cause and effect, the ship projected the human conviction that hitting something with a big enough wrench would eventually fix it. The conceptual warfare raged for what felt like hours, but was actually only minutes. Reality flickered between states of existence and non-existence as two fundamentally incompatible philosophies clashed at the deepest level of universal law. The Devourer Scout insisted that nothing had any inherent right to exist, while the Guardian vessel countered with humanity's absolute refusal to accept that something couldn't be fixed with enough effort and creative profanity. Finally, something gave way. The Devourer Scout found itself caught in a logical paradox of its own making. If it succeeded in proving that nothing had the right to exist, then it would also prove that it had no right to make that argument. The contradiction tore through the creature's consciousness like a conceptual virus, and, with a sound like reality hiccuping, the Void Spawn imploded into a singularity of pure confusion. Target eliminated, Dr. Park announced. The core reports that the Devourer Scout has been philosophically defeated. It got caught in a logic loop, Martinez explained, his voice carrying the satisfaction of a job well done. Turns out that absolute nihilism is self-refuting when you apply it consistently. The victory was impressive, but Zektar noticed that it had come at a cost. The various galactic fleets were still struggling to regain their conceptual bearings, and several ships had suffered permanent damage to their computational systems as their crews tried to reconcile mathematics that no longer made sense. Core, Chun said quietly. If one scout can do this much damage to an entire sector's worth of fleets, what happens when the main force arrives? The main force consists of approximately 4 million Devourers ranging from Class 1 scouts to Class 27 reality engines, the core replied grimly. They will not make the philosophical error that defeated the scout. They will simply edit this galaxy out of existence through brute conceptual force. The silence that followed was profound. Even with Guardian technology, the odds were impossible. One ancient vessel against 4 million entities that could rewrite the laws of physics. Then, we'd better get building, Martinez said from the engineering sections. Core, how fast can we replicate this bucket of bolts? With the manufacturing bay at full capacity and human crews to interface with the construction matrices, we can produce one Guardian vessel every 2 weeks, the core calculated. However, each ship requires a minimum crew of 50 individuals capable of consciousness-level interface with progenitor technology. That's 600 humans for a 12-ship fleet, Chen calculated. The problem is, there are only about 3,000 humans in this entire sector of the galaxy. Then, we expand the definition of human, Dr. Park said suddenly. Core, you mentioned that the consciousness interface process could be adapted for other species. What would that actually involve? Complete neural restructuring to replicate human cognitive flexibility, the core replied. The volunteers would retain their memories and core personality traits, but their thought processes would be fundamentally altered to match human patterns. Fleet Commander ZYX's crystalline voice cut through the discussion. The Crystalline Collectives volunteer our finest research minds for this transformation. If becoming partially human is the price of survival, we are prepared to pay it. Admiral Kreshtar's response was more cautious but equally determined. The hegemony requires detailed analysis of the transformation process, but if it will allow our personnel to crew Guardian vessels, we will consider volunteers. One by one, representatives from every fleet offered their people for the consciousness modification process. The galaxy's most advanced species were volunteering to abandon their own ways of thinking in favor of human cognitive patterns. This is going to be weird, Martinez observed. We're basically about to create a bunch of alien humans. Better than creating a bunch of extinct species, Chen replied pragmatically. Core, how long until the main Devourer force arrives? My deep sensors detect reality distortions consistent with a major Devourer fleet approximately 8 months distant, the core replied. They're taking time to fully consume the sectors in their path, which provides us with additional preparation time. 8 months to build a fleet, train crews, and somehow convince 600 volunteers to undergo neural reconstruction that would fundamentally alter who they were as beings. It seemed impossible, but Zektar was beginning to understand that impossibility was just another engineering challenge for humans. All right, Chen said, settling into the Guardian vessel's command chair as if she'd been born for it. Let's save the galaxy. Martinez, can you get the manufacturing bay online? Already working on it, came the reply. Core, can you show me how to build impossible spaceships with my bare hands and a positive attitude? It would be my pleasure, the core replied, and for the first time in 50,000 years, the ancient intelligence sounded genuinely hopeful. Welcome to the Guardian Corps. As the various fleets began the process of selecting volunteers for the transformation, Zektar found himself wondering if the galaxy was about to witness the birth of an entirely new kind of civilization, one that combined the best traits of every species with humanity's unique ability to make impossible things work. If they succeeded, the Devourers would face something that had never existed before, a united galaxy capable of fighting fire with fire at the conceptual level of reality itself.